America never spends enough on education because we have privatized child rearing, so we have become deadbeat parents of what we call other people's kids. So says Tulane University professor and MSNBC commentator Melissa Harris-Perry in a new promo for the news network. I'm PJTV's Scott Ott, joined now by Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. And let's allow Mrs. Harris-Perry to speak for herself.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Now, men, if anyone can speak authoritatively on this issue, it's the three of us, since we are all parents at the moment of some 77 million American boys and girls under the age of 18, as well as, I suppose, billions of others around the world. So, dads, Stephen Green, there's no arguing with the fact that student performance in U.S. public schools is stagnant and in some subjects like science actually declining. Isn't it encouraging that MSNBC is using its expensive airtime to launch a national dialogue on the root cause of this failure?
Yes, please tell me more about how your discredited and murderous ideology trumps my parental rights. You know what? You know who still have pretty good test scores? Kids in private schools, kids in parochial schools, kids at charter schools, kids who are homeschooled. They're doing great. It's the victims stuck in public schools, and typically, the worst off are urban minority public schools. These kids are these kids are already victims of a culture being destroyed by the money and the violence of the drug war. And instead of schools being their refuge, a place of safety and their ticket out of this, instead they're practically abused by these teachers' unions who have zero interest in educating kids and every interest in feather bedding, and that's exactly what this ad is calling for more of.
Well, Bill Whittle, Melissa Harris-Perry makes two basic points. We don't spend enough on education, and that's because you don't feel responsible for my kids. What can the government and MSNBC, forgive the redundancy, what can they do to get you to take more of an interest in subsidizing the education of the children who I selfishly call mine?
Well, they can start by coming at the pointy end of my AR-15. That's what they can start with. Let me just say something to this lady, to this mixed-race lady who stands there in front of an ivy-covered walls of a campus or a university, who looks so very modern, very 21st century, so well put together, so beautifully made up, and so erudite and so intelligent. There is nothing this woman is saying that is any different in any way, shape, or form or what Joseph Goebbels or Adolf Hitler were saying. The programs are exactly the same. The philosophy is exactly the same. She'd have a cow if you told her to her face. And I'd grab her by the collar and I'd put her in front of 7 or 8 or 12 or 15 hours of film documentary of entire cultures taking people's children away from their parents and raising them by the state so that they can become the Hitler Youth or the whatever youth you want to call it, the Communist Youth Corps. You can find examples of this throughout history, and you have 100 million people dead. And I'm sick and tired of this kind of nonsense from people like this. We're trying to foist this on the American people. We have a history, you know. We've been down this road before. I just do not know when these people are ever going to learn anything. I do not know whether they're ever going to learn a lesson over anything, Scott. They can have the entire parade of dead bodies march past them in single file till the end of time, and they'll never get the idea, not once, not ever.
Well, Steve, as the old African proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child. Monument, Colorado has 2 little boys, I hear, that currently live in your house. Aren't you grateful that you and your wife don't have to take full responsibility for them?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you know, the old joke, and it's really no joke, that we should just send in 100% of our paychecks and Washington will send back whatever is left along with, you know, an EBT card. Look, on responsibility, I'm up at 5 every morning so that I can be showered and shaved and dressed and already working, setting a good example for my sons before I go upstairs and wake them at 7. I'm up at least an hour earlier than I have to be. That's what I do, so that the first thing those boys see of Dad each and every workday is a man prepared to take on the world before dawn. That's the example I try to set. So let me flip the question back and ask, what kind of example is set each and every day by our betters in Washington and those idiots over there at MSNBC who want to take all of that away?
Well, my understanding is at that hour, some of those guys are thinking about going to bed so that they can wake up bright and early at 9:30 to go to the congressional gymnasium to get some work in before they do any, work. Well, Bill, all of the right people are reacting harshly to this ad. Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Sarah Palin, Bill Whittle, the whole pantheon of those right-wing giants. And that's making this video go viral. Now, if you disagree with Melissa Harris-Perry's thesis, wouldn't it be better to just ignore her? I mean, what's the harm in it?
No, categorically, it's not better to ignore. First of all, if you look at the YouTube ratings for this thing, it's got the biggest downtick I've ever seen. It's a giant red bar with a little itty-bitty little bit of green, which can give you a pretty good idea that the population of the United States is composed of about 7% fascists and idiots and 93% people with some fundamental basic level of common sense. These people take your money, they take your property, they take the product of your work, and now they want to take your children. And they want to take your children so they can get them indoctrinated earlier, so they can be part of their little army that'll go forward and do their bidding for them in this giant collectivist future that she outlined very, very clearly. And if you're not angry enough with these people taking your children away from you, Scott, you've got a moral defect, you've got some sort of genetic damage or something wrong with you. There's probably incurable. If you don't understand what these people are up to and what they're trying to do with this beautifully shot, beautifully balanced, beautifully lit, beautifully costumed, beautifully coiffed, beautifully made up woman, if you don't understand what they're saying, then you really, 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 really need to go and visit some barbed wire enclosed cases out in Poland someplace, because you will find the answer to this question. You'll find it very clearly.
Well, Melissa Harris-Perry has a point. I mean, after all, a lot of kids grow up ignorant about math, statistics, and history. Take, for example, well, Melissa Harris-Perry. I mean, here's the inflation-adjusted chart of education spending since 1970 that shows we now spend 3 times as much to educate a child K through 12, and yet we get the same or worse results. Now, who do we blame for Harris-Perry's ignorance on this matter? For heaven's sake, not her parents. I mean, clearly Melissa's yawning ignorance of facts and the historical blindness to the fascistic undertones of her collectivist ideology represent a collective failure by you, me, Bill, and Steve. For all of us here at PJTV, I'm Scott Ott, and I'm truly sorry for what we've done with Mrs. Harris-Perry.